Imagine trying to get 8 billion roommates to agree on a single thermostat setting.
Oh man, that sounds absolutely terrible.
Right, it's a nightmare. But now, imagine if failing to agree meant the entire house literally burns to the ground.
Yeah.
That is, frankly, the terrifying mathematical reality of what we're talking about today. So welcome back to part 3 of our Kardashev Scale series on this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So if you were with us for part 2, we covered the urgent threats that are actively pushing humanity toward the need for global coordination. But today, we are looking at the ultimate challenge itself.
The big one.
The big one. Because reaching a type 1 civilization like, becoming a species capable of harnessing and distributing the energy of an entire planet, it requires coordinating the entire energy output of a world.
Which is just staggering to think about.
It is. That means every single culture, every localized economy, and, every fiercely competing interest working in total unison simultaneously.
Which, let's be honest, is an incredibly tall order. I mean, humanity has never coordinated at this scale before. Not even close.
No.
And that is the exact framework, the specific lens we need to use for our discussion today. We aren't here to ask if planetary cooperation is a morally good thing.
Right. This isn't a philosophy class.
Exactly. We're here to look at the data and ask if it's actually possible for a species wired the way we are. We have to look objectively at current data and historical precedent without, jumping to any absolute conclusions.
Yeah.
We can't assume unity is our inevitable destiny, but we also can't assume it's entirely impossible.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer massive scope of this problem is dizzying. I mean, if you're listening to this and wondering why your local city council takes 3 years to agree on fixing a single pothole.
Which they always do.
Always. The idea of a global energy grid probably sounds like absolute science fiction. So let's ground this. Let's start with where we actually stand right now, looking at the data from 2025 and 2026, because I'm reading through our sources, and the picture is completely contradictory.
It is deeply mixed, really deeply mixed. If we look at the pessimistic side of the ledger, certain annual cooperation assessments show that every single global security metric fell below pre-pandemic levels in 2025.
Wow. Every single one?
Pretty much. Conflicts escalated, military spending rose dramatically, and some data indicates that the number of forcibly displaced people globally reached a staggering record of 123 million.
That is just an incredibly grim statistic.
It is. Furthermore, a major global catastrophic risk report published in late 2025 warned that humanity is currently operating outside a safe space.
Outside a safe space.
Yeah, meaning the institutional guardrails, the diplomatic forums designed to prevent systemic collapse, they frankly look incredibly fragile right now.
Which paints a pretty bleak picture of our ability to work together. But then, in the exact same breath, certain reports show that clean energy deployment hit absolute record levels in that very same year.
Right.
And international science collaborations, they aren't just continuing, they are actively accelerating. I find this deeply contradictory.
How so?
Well, it's like having roommates who are actively throwing plates at each other in the kitchen, but somehow they still manage to successfully pool their money and buy a brand new, highly efficient fridge together.
That's a great way to put it.
How can both of these realities exist at the exact same time?
Well, what's fascinating here is that cooperation isn't monolithic. It's highly sector-specific. We tend to think of global unity as this, binary switch.
Like either we're holding hands or we're at war.
Exactly. Either we are at peace and working together, or we are fragmented and fighting. But the data from 2026 suggests we are perfectly capable of compartmentalizing our survival instincts.
Okay, explain that.
The mechanism at play is localized self-interest. Nations will aggressively compete, even violently so, over physical territory or immediate resources. But simultaneously, they'll cooperate on technological frontiers.
Because it helps them.
Right, because sharing that specific data accelerates their own localized economic growth.
So it's a fractured, purely pragmatic approach.
Yeah, very much so.
But I have to challenge the idea that this fractured model gets us to type 1, because if our current state is this chaotic mix of incredible technological breakthroughs and terrifying diplomatic breakdowns, we have to look backward.
At the historical pattern.
Yeah. How has humanity historically handled scaling up our level of cooperation?
The historical progression is brutal. If we trace the human story, the primary unit of cooperation for most of our existence was the tribe.
Okay.
Then, very slowly, it became the city, and then eventually the nation. But we have to look closely at the timeline and the mechanism of those shifts.
And it wasn't exactly smooth.
Not at all. Every single one of those transitions required centuries, sometimes millennia, of enormous, bloody conflict before the new, larger unit actually stabilized. Yeah. Scaling up is almost never a peaceful, voluntary handshake. It is usually a systemic reorganization forged under immense, unavoidable pressure.
And that history makes me incredibly skeptical of our timeline. I mean, let's talk about the biology of this for a second.
Sure.
Evolutionary psychology points to Dunbar's number. That's the idea that our brains are cognitively hardwired to meaningfully track social relationships with only about 150 people.
Right, the biological limit.
Exactly. The tribe is our biological default. So when we talk about scaling up to 8 billion people, we are literally fighting our own neurology.
We are.
If it took centuries of relentless war just to get neighboring cities to override their biology and form a single nation, what makes anyone think species-level cooperation is achievable on any useful timeline?
It's a fair point.
I mean, the failure rate of scaling up is astronomical.
It's a highly valid critique. If we look at the most ambitious modern experiment in cooperation, we see this exact biological and structural struggle.
You mean
a massive modern continental economic and political union, one formed in the aftermath of the 20th century's global conflicts.
Oh, right, yeah.
You have dozens of nations trying to operate under a shared economic and legislative umbrella.
Yeah.
But the mechanism is flawed.
How so?
They share a currency, but they maintain separate localized fiscal policies. And it results in a constant, exhausting tug of war. National tribal interests inevitably, almost gravitationally, pull against the global collective.
Absolutely. I see that happening in real time. Member states within that continental union are constantly threatening to leave, or they're arguing over shared budgets.
Or closing borders.
Yeah, violently closing borders the second a localized crisis hits. It really feels like the gravitational pull of the biological tribe is simply too strong to overcome without an external threat forcing the issue.
Yet we can't ignore the counter-evidence where we have actually bypassed that biological limitation.
Okay, when has that happened?
Well, cooperation can work against all odds, provided the structural incentives are perfectly aligned. The one global treaty most researchers cite as the clearest success story in human history involved a very specific atmosphere-destroying chemical threat.
Right, the ozone issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The ozone layer was rapidly depleting, and despite all the fierce national interests and massive economic costs involved, the world actually came together.
They really did.
They signed an agreement, phased out those specific chemicals, and the atmosphere is actively healing. It worked.
I'm glad you brought that up because comparing a single chemical ban from a few decades ago to re-engineering the entire global energy economy feels like, I don't know, changing a light bulb to rewiring a 100-story skyscraper while the building is actively on fire.
That's a dramatic visual, but fair.
I mean, why did that one specific chemical agreement work so beautifully when almost every other global environmental or security initiative simply collapses into endless bureaucratic committee meetings?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, successful cooperation at a global scale usually relies on three distinct pillars.
Okay, what are they?
First, a shared existential threat, something that does not respect borders and threatens the localized survival of every nation equally.
Makes sense. The sky is falling for everyone.
Right. Second, clear enforcement mechanisms. You need agreements with teeth.
Teeth are important.
Yeah. In the chemical ban example, the treaty included strict trade restrictions against non-compliant nations. It made it economically devastating to refuse participation.
You literally couldn't afford to sit out.
Exactly. And the third pillar is mutual economic benefit.
Wait, hold on. How was banning a widely used chemical economically beneficial?
Well, because of how intellectual property works.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the patents on those older destructive chemicals were expiring anyway. By agreeing to a global ban, the chemical industry essentially forced the creation of a massive, lucrative new market for replacement compounds that they held the new patents for. The transition aligned planetary survival with localized corporate profit.
So it wasn't just altruism at all. It was deeply pragmatic economics.
Mostly.
But let's apply those three pillars to a much more recent example from our sources. In early 2026, a legally binding framework for protecting the majority of the world's oceans finally entered into force.
Yes, that was a huge milestone.
On paper, it sounds amazing, a huge win for global cooperation. But there is a staggering detail here. It took 2 decades of negotiation just to agree to protect international waters.
20 years.
20 years. If agreeing on water, which we literally all need to survive, took 20 years of diplomatic gridlock, how long does building a planetary energy grid take?
That is the big question.
Are we looking at a sign of hope here, or a glaring mathematical warning that our political process is just impossibly slow for what a Type 1 civilization requires?
It undeniably highlights the extreme friction of our current political systems. When you have nearly 200 sovereign entities, all with veto power and competing localized interests, the math of consensus becomes agonizingly, dangerously slow.
So we're doomed.
Well, not necessarily. This is where technology, specifically artificial intelligence, might alter the logistical equation.
Really? AI?
Yeah. What's fascinating here is the potential of AI as a direct coordination tool. Can advanced computational systems solve the scaling issues that human politics simply cannot?
But wait, utilizing AI coordination still requires human governments to hand over the keys to their power grids. What sovereign nation is going to cede its energy security to a neutral third-party algorithm?
They wouldn't be ceding political sovereignty, though. They would be outsourcing logistical complexity.
Okay, how does that work?
Think about the mechanism of a global energy grid. It requires optimizing trillions of data points across thousands of jurisdictions in real time.
Which a human can't do.
Right. It means predicting microfluctuations in localized weather patterns and routing surplus wind energy from one continent to cover a cloud cover deficit in another in milliseconds.
Okay, yeah. Human bureaucracy cannot physically negotiate that trade.
Exactly. AI could potentially act as the invisible underlying infrastructure of cooperation, handling the rapid-fire logistics of resource sharing so smoothly that political consensus becomes a secondary bottleneck.
That implies building a centralized technological authority, though, which brings me to a massive red flag.
Go ahead.
This agonizingly slow pace of global treaties. It begs a darker question. What if this slow, fragmented, deeply frustrating diplomatic process isn't actually a failure of our species?
In what sense?
Let's give genuine weight to the case against unity for a second. We keep operating under the assumption that planetary coordination is the ultimate goal, but maybe human tribalism is an evolutionary feature, not a bug.
A feature?
Yeah. For thousands of years, keeping things local, maintaining diverse approaches to survival, and being deeply skeptical of centralized, distant authority is exactly what kept us alive as a species.
It certainly kept us highly adaptable. If one localized tribe or nation-state failed due to a flawed policy, the others survived precisely because they were disconnected.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. If we achieve total planetary unity, a single unified world government or planetary authority managing a Type 1 energy grid, we are creating the ultimate single point of failure problem.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Think about it like computer network architecture. If you wire every single server in a company to one centralized mainframe and that mainframe gets a virus, the entire system crashes instantly.
This raises an important question, and it's a terrifying one to consider.
Right.
In our current deeply fragmented world, if one nation makes a catastrophic policy error regarding its economy or its environmental regulations, the damage is tragic, but it is contained.
The species as a whole endures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if a singular planetary authority makes a critical, centralized miscalculation regarding atmospheric engineering or artificial intelligence containment or energy distribution,
The entire species pays the price simultaneously.
there is no backup system.
It's exactly like agricultural monoculture.
Yeah.
Like if you only plant one highly efficient, genetically identical crop across the entire world, a single specific disease can wipe out the entire global food supply overnight.
Which has almost happened before.
Exactly. Diversity of thought and governance is what provides systemic resilience. So, is a Type 1 civilization even mathematically possible without a world government? Because we continually conflate the idea of planetary coordination with planetary government.
They do.
Do they absolutely have to be the exact same thing?
I really don't believe they do, and the current data suggests we might be actively finding alternative, decentralized routes.
So we can coordinate without a global dictator?
Yes. A diversity of approaches, combined with localized governance, might actually provide far more systemic resilience than a monolithic, top-down global state. We might not need a single president of Earth or a unified planetary parliament to harness the planet's energy.
So, if a top-down planetary government is either impossibly slow to build, evolutionarily unnatural for our primate brains, or just mathematically too risky due to the single point of failure.
Yeah.
How do we actually get to type 1? What is the realistic mechanical path forward here?
The realistic path is almost certainly bottom-up cooperation. It relies on invisible threads tying the planet together without requiring explicit political unification.
Invisible threads, like what?
Look at global trade networks and global technology standards. The internet, for example, wasn't built by a single world government decree.
No, it definitely wasn't.
It was built through shared protocols, driven by powerful economic incentives and technological integration. You can have a deeply decentralized, politically fractured world that is nonetheless perfectly coordinated technologically and economically.
Okay, so the idea is we coordinate the grid without necessarily coordinating the politicians.
Basically, yes.
We let the infrastructure unify us while our cultures and governments remain delightfully, stubbornly distinct.
That's the hope.
But we still need a catalyst, right? Protocols don't just invent themselves out of thin air. We need something to force the issue, because right now, as the 2026 data shows, we are still throwing plates in the kitchen.
That is where forcing functions come into play.
Forcing functions.
Shared, immediate, and undeniable threats. Things like compounding climate feedback loops or the rapid development of unregulated computational power. These might serve as the ultimate forcing functions.
Like the ozone hole, but bigger.
Much bigger. We most likely will not coordinate out of a sudden enlightened sense of global brotherhood. We will coordinate out of pure, unadulterated self-preservation.
Which is very on brand for humans.
It really is.
Yeah.
When the alternative to technological cooperation is literal extinction, the math of consensus tends to accelerate dramatically.
Nothing focuses the human mind quite like a ticking clock. But, there's another angle in the sources that gives me pause, and it actually points away from just sheer terror.
Oh, what's that?
Some data indicates that younger generations are consistently polling as far more globally minded than any previous generation in recorded history.
That's true. The data does support that.
They are statistically more likely to view threats as global rather than national. So could we be looking at a slow, generational, or almost biological shift in how human beings define the boundaries of the tribe?
It is entirely possible, and it relates directly back to evolutionary psychology.
How so?
Well, the environment we grow up in dictates how our brains draw cognitive boundaries. If you grow up instantly connected to peers across the globe, sharing the exact same digital culture, participating in the same global economy, and facing the exact same planetary anxieties.
Your tribe just naturally gets bigger.
Exactly. Your biological definition of us versus them naturally expands to encompass a wider network.
Which is incredibly hopeful. But honestly, looking at everything we've debated today, the plummeting security metrics, the record-breaking clean energy deployment, the agonizing 20-year water treaties, and the terrifying mathematical risk of a single point of failure, I have to openly admit my own genuine uncertainty here.
Yeah.
I really don't know if we can pull this off.
I share that exact uncertainty. I mean, reaching type 1 requires an incredibly precarious balancing act.
It really does.
We have to perfectly coordinate our planetary infrastructure to survive without centralizing our political power so much that we become structurally fragile. It is a monumental, unprecedented needle to thread.
And you have to appreciate the dark cosmic humor in it all, honestly. We are a species capable of mapping our own genome and theoretically planning interstellar energy grids, and yet we still get bogged down for 20 years arguing over who gets to fish in which specific part of the ocean.
It's a very human contradiction.
The gap between what the physics of a Type 1 civilization requires and what humans actually do on a daily basis is just staggering. But then again, our capacity to adapt at the last possible terrifying second is also kind of our evolutionary trademark.
We are nothing if not a species that thrives on the absolute edge of a deadline.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive asking not if human unity is a morally good idea, but if it is actually mechanically possible for a species wired like ours to achieve the coordination required for a Type 1 civilization.
Right.
And as we look backward at the data, you just have to remember one crucial thing. Every single previous scale of human cooperation, from the tribe to the city to the nation, seemed completely, laughably impossible before it happened.
But then it happened.
And then in hindsight, it looked totally inevitable.
The question isn't just whether we have the time for the next transition to follow this same bloody, centuries-long pattern. The real question you have to sit with is this. Is human unity a prerequisite for our survival? Or is survival a prerequisite for human unity?